Fuck, cursed Tanner under his breath. Even the most efficient use of our water wouldn't clear half of that fecal garrison. Tanner gripped the bridge of his nose in annoyance. We have to cut our losses and turn back. At least we managed to learn where their headquarters is located. So what? I asked indignantly. So we can come back later and lose more men on those 2 trips? Tanner's frustration faltered. Earlier today, you told us yourself, we're all that's left. If we leave now, we fail. That's all there is to it. I knew well enough by then not to push too far against this particular man. Despite his evident capability, he wasn't thinking clearly at that moment. All the more reason to make the situation clearer to him. So what do you suggest we do then, smartass? Tanner asked with a grin. Clearly you must have some kind of plan, unless you're just trying to take Erwin's place in the sewers. I'll admit I was taken aback by that. If that's the case, then all I have to say is that there's more at stake here than your prima donna guilty conscience. Although still a head shorter than I, Tanner made me flinch when stepping up to me. Actually, I have an idea. Constantine chimed in, capturing our attention. First off, it's pretty disgusting, but I'm willing to bear that cross. Second off, it's a bit of a gamble, kind of based on a lot of assumptions about how the shit golems work. But if it works, the payoff will be fucking tight, like right hand to God. Like you said, this needs to get done, and we're kind of fucked either way. After sharing an amused glance with one another, Tanner and I nodded. Constantine then proceeded to explain in excruciating detail his inspired masterstroke of a plan.
Greetings, my brothers in shit!
Constantine bellowed with muffled magnanimity beneath the mound of shit that covered him.
The men behind me have submitted themselves to the sorcerer's will. They wish to receive the idols from the mystic.
Constantine gestured to the rest of us, bereft of our water tanks, with hoods over our heads. The next part will depend on whether or not the shit golems are in possession of their own consciousness, or if they're controlled by an outside force, and how clever said outside force might be. I remembered Constantine saying, as the shit golem facing him eyed the rest of us with the usual vacant expression. If the shit golems are controlled by one consciousness, these guards will recognize the rest of you immediately, which is a risk we can't take. Fortunately, we know the shit golems are made through some kind of voluntary process, which means a transport of willing prisoners wouldn't be too out of the ordinary. Unfortunately, all of this leaves us completely vulnerable if this doesn't work. If that turns out not to be the case, I'll have a water tank under my disguise, and I'll hold them off while the rest of you rendezvous back here where the rest of the water tanks will be. The words echoed in my mind as the shit golem inspected all of us while Constantine stood by. It slowed its pace a bit when it reached Tanner in particular. That should give the rest of you a fighting chance. It's my assumption that we're staking this on, so I'm willing to take on the weight of its failure if need be. I recalled the words upon seeing Constantine tense up at the shit golem's hesitancy. After a while, the shit golem nodded to Constantine, and we passed through the throng and made our way into the main hall. Not a moment after the door closed, Constantine convulsed rapidly as Andrew and a few others began clearing the casing that had covered his body since the plan's initial execution. After he had mostly been cleaned off, Tanner took the water tank from him, as we had unanimously decided that if we'd only have one going forward, it should go to him. Well, I'll be fucked, Tanner said as he equipped the tank. Anyway, the rest of you have a good time trying to locate the mystic. Turns out I'm a little better at getting my point across to shit monsters than people. With that, the rest of us carried on until we reached the main hall. Before us stood a procession of people of all kinds. Men, women, even confused, frightened children stood in line before a robed man, flanked on either side by two others. The robes of the men facing the procession were all a dark brown. Another man sat in a chair up against the wall on the other side of the room. Unlike the others, the robe he sported was maroon. The mystic, Andrew thought silently out loud. As we got closer, we began to hear the chanting of the people more clearly. The fuck is that gibberish they're saying? Kudos to the staircase? Frank asked. It's a phrase I heard one of them say in the sewers with Erwin and the others. Kidos aposterkos, I said. I have no idea what it means. This might sound weird, but it sounds similar to the original Indo-European language. I only know because sterkos is the word in that language for poop, Constantine offered. I figured it must be related based on, the context. We all silently pondered what our admittedly clever, erstwhile shit-covered friend had said, as we got closer still. From this vantage, we began to notice that those in line had been eating from the hand of one of the robed men, as if they were the faithful receiving communion from a priest. Oh fuck, Andrew said flatly. They're feeding those people those little wizard statues, and we left all our fucking gear outside. Hey buddy, I said to the shaking Andrew. You've got a long pair of legs. Why don't you quietly run back to Tanner and get him back here? With that, he nodded and did as I told him. I figured that the quicker we can get Tanner back here, the better. We need to ensure that we can move in on those men before they could goop too many of these people into shit golem servitude. That way we could make off with the mystic without any hassle. Of course, this was based on an assumption on my part that if we could somehow incapacitate the mystic, this would deactivate the shit golems. But we wouldn't be able to get close to him unless we had Tanner with us, to take out the shit golems that were already bound to be made, having passed through the procession. Thankfully, in the time it took to explain this to the rest of my team, Andrew returned with Tanner, who was quick on the take. From there, the others charged the three men while Tanner stayed in place, water tank at the ready. I made my way around the room in order to sneak up on the mystic. During their charge, the others were stopped dead in their tracks, doubling over with what appeared to be stomach pain, when one of the robed men raised his hand. "Oh God, what the fuck?" Constantine cried out. "Did you just give all of us diarrhea at the same time?" Andrew echoed. "You should know better than to challenge the will of the sorcerer." The familiar voice of the robed man spoke, a bit too late. In the time it took for him to cast his spell, I managed to incapacitate the mystic by hitting him in the head with a fire extinguisher that I had grabbed off the wall before. His body fell limply to the ground. The robed men turned in shock to face me. "Wait a second." Another familiar voice coming from the robed man on the caster's left said. "Jeremy, is that you slippery little shit?" "Wade?" I asked in disbelief that was further exacerbated by the removal of the man's hood. "I thought I told you I had this handled, Jeremy," Wade said as he pulled his revolver on me. As pangs of betrayal began to wash over, the man in the center spoke again. "Wait a second, this guy is your brother?" The voice, again, was familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. "Yes," the robed man on the right said, confirming my worst suspicion. "And you two are going about all of this the wrong way." "No," I choked out through a lump in my throat. "Not you too. Please, Ben, tell me you're not party to this." Jeremy, I understand you've always struggled with letting other people try and help you. But it's not too late to find your way along the true path, Ben said, as if he were speaking to a misguided parishioner. I understand the doubts you may have, but I assure you that I will assuage all of them. All I ask is that just for this moment, you take a leap of faith, Jeremy. I don't understand, I said, struggling to find the words. Ben, you were always a man of God. I mean, for as long as I can remember, you were the one kid who actually looked forward to being an altar server. You never doubted a word of the catechism, even for a second. More than that, you like to help people, to give them guidance in a time of need, to be there for them. And Wade, you held the law as sacred, and not even as some abstract code that you think gives you the right to torture people, but to ensure that there is order and peace. I mean, that's what you kept telling everyone when they gave you shit for joining the force, that you wouldn't be one of the dirty ones. We are very much the same men you always knew, Jeremy. Flaws and all, Ben began. The only difference now is that we understand the truth. Let us help you, little brother. At that moment, the others attacked the three robed men from behind. In the commotion, I ran to Tanner with the mystic on my back. If they could have, half these people would have been made into shit golems by now. I'd be willing to wager the ones outside are incapacitated as well, I said, laying the mystic at Tanner's feet. Take him back to HQ and keep him knocked out. We'll follow you after we deal with these three. Now, look at you, delegating, Tanner said with a confident smile. I could roll with it. With that, he dragged the mystic out of the room. When I turned my focus to the fight in the corner, I saw that my brothers had both been knocked out cold, and Wade's gun had found itself in Frank's hand, pointed at the head of the third robed man. Start talking, I commanded, glaring at him. In response, I heard disembodied laughter from all around me, as did the others based on their reactions. Like I said before, the robed man boasted as the laughter droned on. It is futile to deny the will of the sorcerer. The laughter was all I could hear, as all of my other senses failed, and I fell into unconscious oblivion.